Hey everybody, it's Anna and welcome back to my booktube channel. Wonder of wonders, I'm actually sitting down to film a Geekly Wrap Up. This is my Geekly Wrap Up for the month, of September / beginning of October, maybe very late end of August. Honestly, my reading for pleasure has kind of been all over the place. I've been doing a lot of reading for work, but my concentration has been shot and my energy levels have been low. So this past month or so, I've mostly just been rereading things that I have read already, that I know that I enjoy, that I return to when I want something familiar and comforting. So I wanted to go ahead and share those with you. Your mileage may vary on how comforting these actually are. I tend to find stories like these very comforting, but they are not necessarily feel-good stories, if that makes sense. And I also do have one board game to share with you, because even though our usual group of people that we would play board games with and such is not able to meet in person because of the pandemic, we actually have my brother-in-law staying with us now. So that means that when my husband and I play board games together, we have a third person, and that opens up a lot of different games that we can now play. So let's go ahead and do the books first. I am continuing with what I am dubbing my Rolling Rothfuss reread, because I'm basically always rereading Patrick Rothfuss's books, and I actually finished a reread of The Name of the Wind. This didn't all happen in a single month. I basically always have one or both or all three of his books on my nightstand at any given time, and if I can't fall asleep or if I just don't have the brain power to start a new book, I will pick one of these up and just keep reading it. I love these books, but also, upon this reread, I found myself extraordinarily annoyed with Denna's character, and also extraordinarily annoyed with Kvothe's character. I think I'm just in kind of a grumpy mood, and do not have the patience to deal with their nonsense. I loved Devi, I loved Ori, as I always do. I love all of the descriptions of the teachers at the Arcanum, because having spent a fair amount of my time in a higher education setting as well, I know exactly who those people correspond to. So obviously, this book doesn't really need any introduction or explanation. It's just something that I'm constantly rereading, and it always makes me feel like I'm coming home when I do. I also returned to my greatest hit from, I think, the year 2017, which was The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. I'm kind of running an impromptu community book club for Encounter Roleplay, which is one of the channels that I stream tabletop games with. Everybody there kind of figured out pretty quickly that I love books, because if you talk to me for more than 5 minutes, that's something that you learn. And so I kind of got a little book club thing going, and this was the book that I picked for September. This book you've heard me gush about before if you have watched my channel, but in case you haven't, this is basically like queer found family in space, and I freaking love it. It does so many of the science fiction tropes that may be tired out, but puts a fresh new spin on them. It is thought-provoking, it is sweet, it is tender, and the characters actually do have to face some difficult decisions. I kind of don't love when in science fiction it's like, you must choose between light and dark, and it's so clear, why would you ever choose dark? But everything in this is a little bit more morally gray. Everything in this really has a lot to do with the relationships between the crew that is going to be spending a long chunk of the foreseeable future together as they fly into space to basically punch a wormhole in space for mining. This is part of a loosely connected series. You don't have to read them in any particular order. My favorite one is the second book, but it was really awesome to be able to revisit this first book and also share it with some other people who had never read it before. One that I just recently finished rereading was The Accident Season by Moira Fowley Doyle. I found a bunch of her books half price, and I knew that they were books that I wanted to own, so I went ahead and purchased them, and I'm kind of rereading all of them slowly but surely throughout October and spooky season. I read this last year, and I've also mentioned it in both my cozy and my spooky autumnal reads, so I'll be pretty quick about this, but this is a book about a family where every October they have what is called the accident season, so people within the family end up having these weird accidents or injuries or things happening to them that nobody can explain, but they become very serious, and during the worst accident seasons, members of the family die. So this is the story of some of the kids from this family. They're late teenager aged kids, and what happens during the accident season that is going to change their life forever. I revisited a couple of favorite books from stuff that I studied in college but like continue reading, despite the fact that it's been years now since I actually last did this in Latin. The first of those is the Poems of Catullus, which does not show up well at all on this camera. This guy is a contemporary of Julius Caesar's, and he wrote poems that are essentially early versions of what we would now call diss tracks. These poems are full of salt. A lot of them are very inappropriate. A lot of them tell his critics exactly where they can go put what, and I really love them. These are poems that are basically like the messiest parts of the human experience. The fact that, you know, he writes so many poems about love and how messed up it can be. And he writes a lot of poems about basically trying to prove wrong all of his naysayers. He has a couple other longer ones that are a bit more like mythologically oriented or about going on a long journey. I have many, many favorites among these, but these are poems that I return to pretty often, especially my favorite ones, but this was the first time I'd actually sat down since college and like read all of them through in order, start to finish. This edition is really nice. It's the one that's edited and translated by Peter Green. I like it because it's a bilingual edition and it's glossed pretty well. It's also got a bunch of introductory apparatus and things like that as well. So if you are looking for a bilingual edition, this is pretty good. And also the translation doesn't translate the raunchy stuff into really archaic English. So I appreciate that. And then I reread, which I did not do in Latin because, God, I'm rusty, is Metamorphoses by Ovid. Again, I hadn't read this all the way through since college. But I recently rewatched Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which is a movie that is kind of a retelling in some ways of the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. Obviously, that's really topical right now because everybody is playing Hades and everybody's horny for the Greek gods, but I was reading this like a month before Hades came out, and now I'm just like, yeah, I can see that. This is a long epic poem about a bunch of different figures from mythology that undergo changing of bodies. And I really think that this read-through hit me hard in a way that I did not anticipate. I think one of the things that stood out to me most that I was kind of aware of but wasn't really feeling it the first time that I read it was the fact that as terrible as it is to be a mortal in these stories and get yourself changed into a stag that's ripped apart by your own hounds or run away from somebody that is trying to pursue you romantically and get turned into a tree, as horrible as all of that is, it is far worse to be a god who lives forever and who never changes and who is therefore always mourning and never able to move on from the terrible things that happen. The Helios story really brought that home to me this time, and I thought it was so sad that he's just always going to be mourning his son forever because he's a god and he's never going to get out of that moment where he agreed to let his son drive his chariot. So, you know, I wasn't crying late at night about this or anything like that. I wasn't actually crying. I was mostly just sadly staring at the wall. But this is a really great translation of this poem. It's translated by Charles Martin, and this is the Norton edition, which I think is the most recent one that they've come out with. I did actually read one new book, but dear Lord, it was short but heavy, and that is Watch Over Me by Nina LaCour. All of my sad sapphics out there are going to not be surprised when I tell you that this book legitimately just destroyed me. This is a story about a girl who has aged out of the foster care system and is going to become a teacher on this farm where there are a bunch of other kids that, for whatever reason, are having trouble with the foster system. And there is a sort of mystery going on this farm where they all live. There's word that there are ghosts living there. Nobody is quite sure whether these ghosts are literal, figurative, anything like that. And I'm not going to say any more because the joy of this book is in the reading of it. I think for this book in particular, I have never read something that spoke so specifically to my own things that have hurt me in the past without actually making it hurt again. It hurt, but it wasn't bad, if that makes sense. So reading this was a total trip. I sat down, I read it in one sitting. I was like, whoa, I need to deal with this for a little while. And then I sat down and just started reading it again instantly. So it's short, but I've read it twice this month because it's really, really good. This one comes with some content warnings because it deals with some pretty heavy subject matter, including child abuse and mentions of suicide, self-harm, addiction, and sexual assault. So keep that in mind when you're reading it. But Nina LaCour did it again. Nina LaCour can write so well about grief and hurt and sorrow, but also in like a strangely hopeful sort of way without being cheesy or insensitive. And I'm jealous. I wish I could do that. The last thing that I have to share with you today is actually the board game that I have been enjoying this last month, and that is Fort. Fort is a very small little box. It is a deck building game where you are playing a bunch of kids that are trying to make the best clubhouse by accumulating the most toys and pizza so the other kids will come play with you. I love a game where I can win by having the most pizza. That's great. So this game, as far as deck builders go, is pretty light for a deck builder. It's not a light game, but it is light for a deck builder. Essentially, you end up drafting your cards into your treehouse, and the cards are all different kids that have different power-ups and things like that. You play cards, other people are able to draft or take actions from the cards that you play, and then the thing that keeps this interesting is that any cards that you don't play that aren't then, discarded and put back in your deck become part of a publicly available pool for other players to draft. So the way they explain this in the game is if you don't choose to, play with these kids from your hand, the kids are going to go out into the yard and find somebody else to play with. We played this a couple of times now. I managed to win the first time that we played it ever. And I hadn't played this since, we play tested it and was literally like cutouts on an index card kind of thing. So I was kind of surprised that I pulled that off pretty early on. But it was awesome. I had the best treehouse. I really, really like this game. Obviously, I love the artwork. This artist is the same person that did artwork for Root, which is my favorite board game ever. I have talked about it before, if you haven't heard about that. But Fort is great. I really enjoy it. You can definitely play it multiple times in a night if you like it and you're like, I love it so much, let's do it again. May the macaroni sculpture always be yours, and may your treehouse have the most pizza. So that is going to do it for this month's, Geekly Wrap Up. Leave me a comment down below and let me know something that you have been enjoying reading or listening to or watching or playing or whatever. We are equal opportunity media consumers on this channel. If you like this video and you'd like to see more of what I do, go ahead and make sure you're subscribed to my channel because that is the best way to get updates every time I post a new video. As always, thank you all so very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.